9, 12, 10, 28, 2, 23.
This is Deep State Radio.
Hello, loyal Deep State Radio listeners. I'm John Wolfstall and your host for another episode of We're All Gonna Die Radio. I know a number of you weren't sure you'd make it to the end of the week, but congratulations, you have, despite President Putin's efforts to make us wonder. We've got actually a very interesting and atypical conversation today with an old colleague and friend who has written a fictional book about war and conflict and nuclear weapons. And it was just too good an opportunity to pass on. And so we're thrilled today to welcome world-renowned journalist and author Fred Kaplan. Fred, welcome.
Thanks. Anytime, John.
Fred is the national security correspondent at Slate magazine. He's the author of a number of irreplaceable and essential books on the roles of nuclear weapons throughout American history. My personal favorite is The Bomb, which chapter by chapter relays the major nuclear events under multiple presidencies dating back to the origin of the nuclear age. I was in the Obama administration, and I learned stuff about nuclear weapons under the Obama administration by reading The Bomb. And anytime I mention you, they're like, oh yeah, Fred Kaplan, he wrote The Bomb. So, but you're the author of a new book, Capital Calamity, and it's not your regular old academic, let's get it into the library book. It's a fictionalized narrative account of a potential conflict. And so without giving too much away, Fred, I want you to tell our listeners a little bit both what the book is, but what I'm really curious is you've written lots of books, right? You were a Pulitzer-Prize finalist. You know, what made you want to switch genres? But first, why don't you tell people a little bit about the book?
Well, I mean, it is a novel. It's not. It's a straightforward. Although the epigraph does read, "Much of what follows is true except for the plot." So it's a novel based on many of my experiences and observations over the years in this field. The basic premise is that it's about a very cynical defense consultant named Serge Willoughby. He's cynical in the sense that he will do a pro-bomber study for the Air Force, and then right away, he'll do an anti-bomber study for the Navy to double his fees. And through an act of merry mischief and revenge, he accidentally triggers a war with China. The opening lines of the book are, Serge Willoughby just wanted to make money and have fun. He didn't mean to start World War III. And then as the book goes through, he basically realizes he has to help stop the war. And through this, there's sort of a personal evolution of realizing the necessity, at least sometimes, to behave like a responsible citizen. So it's I hope it's funny, but it also has, what you might call a moral arc, like many entertainments of this sort do.
Fred, so let me reassure you, as somebody who digested the book just this week on plane trips to and from London, it is very funny. It makes me wonder how you really feel about your life in Washington, because there is a lot of cynicism in it, right? And yeah. I don't think you can be in Washington without recognizing there are a lot of people in this town that don't care about the impact. They care about their status and are they relevant and players. But it also it rang true for me because a lot of the places that are inhabited in the book are the places that I've gotten to live. So whether that's in DuPont Circle or the White House or the Pentagon, or as I told you, my misspent youth on McDougal and Bleecker Street, there's some great stuff here. But there's definitely a dark tone to how you view the Washington process, right? You can't read that book and say, man, this guy really loves DC. So, do you feel, as you said, it's a novel, it's fiction, but do you feel it's accurate? Like, do you feel there are more cynics in DC than do-gooders?
Well, as one sign of my attitude toward Washington, I should make plain, as you know, I think, that I've lived for the last 25 years no, wait a minute, the last 30 years in New York. I live in Brooklyn. I did live in Washington for, oh God, let's see, 78 to 90, about as long a time. But yeah, I think so. I mean, basically, this guy, Willoughby, for a lot of reasons in his background, as well as a very disillusioning experience that occurs to him when he's working on the Hill, thinks that nobody has any genuine beliefs about anything. Everything that people believe is based on their self-interest. And so he carves out a life for himself along the same philosophy. But as I say, I mean, it's also true. And it is true. I don't think the book is autobiographical, but we all have these moments when on the one hand we look around us and we say, this is all just a lot of crap. I mean, nobody is believing anything they say. Everybody knows that what they just did is no basis at all. And yet once in a while, a moment emerges when a good piece of analysis or a sound moment of historical perspective really does lead to a wise decision and maybe even changes the world a little bit. And you have to be open to those moments as well. And Willoughby learns how to do that as the book proceeds. But yeah, along the way, he's very cynical. And I didn't have to take a huge stretch to by that character's attitude toward things.
Yeah, well, I believe me, I'm not suggesting that you have to throw a cat very far to find somebody like that, right? I mean, and I started in the defense contracting world, and I very rapidly made a U-turn into policy because I didn't want to write papers about the first paper I wrote for my boss. He said, John, I know you support arms control and you think like an end to testing of nuclear weapons is a good idea. I want you to write the top 10 reasons why we should stop testing. And then they took that and used it as opposition research so they could counter the argument. So at that point, I knew defense contract. But I was curious because you've also spent a lot of time in the nuclear community. You're as much a nuclear expert as anybody I know, and in some ways more insightful than most of the people that I work with. And my sense is people that are advocating for nuclear restraint or the nuclear skeptics, they really do believe it. They are driven by a sense of, and people that support stronger investments in nuclear deterrence, maintaining nuclear weapons options, they also think that's a way to stop these weapons from being used. They're genuine in wanting to avoid their use. So do you feel like that element comes into your book, that there are these believers, or I guess I'm trying to ask, Fred, do you think we're really doomed?
Well, on that level, on that question, I remember Daniel Ellsberg once telling me, when he was at the Rand Corporation, he was recalling when he was at the Rand Corporation. He joined in 1960 when he was 29 years old, and Rand had a very generous life insurance policy. And he and a couple of other people about the same age didn't sign up for it.
Yeah, right.
Because they figured they were never going to collect. There was going to be a nuclear war, and their premium payments would have gone down the tubes. And toward the end of his life, I reminded him of this, and I asked him, if somebody had asked you in 1960, what are the odds that by the year 2023, nobody will have used a nuclear weapon in a war? He said, I would have said the odds are near zero.
Yeah, right.
So it looked back then pretty inevitable. People thought a war with Russia was pretty inevitable. We didn't really have much of a conventional defense. So if it was going to happen, nuclear weapons would enter very early on. Right. And we had no limited options. It would have pretty much blown up the world.
Yeah.
And yet here we are, John.
So I want you to know,
a new president's wonderful cabinet.
I do pay for my life insurance premiums at my office, and they're not quite as generous as the Rand Corporation. But that's a perfect segue for this, Fred, because two things struck me. One is you didn't have the plot of the book be a U.S.-Russian war, right?
No.
So we're here, a day or two after Vladimir Putin had launched let's argue it, intermediate range, intercontinental range ballistic missile into Ukraine. A lot of people think it's signaling. It's potentially a nuclear capable missile. Those dangers are higher than they've been in 30 plus years, and maybe as high as they've been since the 60s. But you chose China. And so...
Well, I should note, I started writing this novel before the invasion of Ukraine. So the idea of a war with Russia didn't even occur to me. I did make some adjustments as I went back to, I guess I better put in this. So yeah, that's the reason. I wasn't making any. When I started writing this book, which was near the beginning of the lockdown, which is why I started writing this book.
Right.
China was the
so
big
Count Rostov is a insertion.
Yeah. Well, no, he was always in there, but I played it up a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
How do you look at the situation with China now? Obviously you wrote the book because you have all of this knowledge, and it's a fantastic way to share it beyond our cylinder of excellence, right? Our, the tiny little bubble. But as you're looking at the lineup that Trump is putting in place, Marco Rubio, Congressman Waltz, if Hegseth gets in, do you feel like we're going to the mattresses on China? Is that the writing on the wall?
Well, all of the quote unquote, the few serious people that he's appointed, all have, I think, genuinely hawkish views toward China, right? The others, who knows what they really believe. They've adopted it because they know that's what gets them on board. I would say there is almost a limitless degree to which Trump can be manipulated by clever foreign leaders. And every foreign leader has been informed of this, even if their intelligence agencies are mediocre. You know that the way to get him into your pocket is to call him sir. He once boasted about the head of the Taliban calling him Your Excellency. He boasted about it. Call him sir, laugh at his jokes, play golf with him, compliment the game, write him love letters like Kim Jong-un did. And so maybe Xi Jinping has a way of drawing him into his orbit. We don't know. At the same time, Xi Jinping really does have interests. Most world leaders act primarily in accordance with their interests. He does have an interest in making China the dominant player in Asia, and eventually turning the Western world's economic system around to something that if he doesn't lead, at least that he can exploit to his benefit.
Yeah.
Now, if Trump is from day one keen to start imposing 60% tariffs on all Chinese imports, well, I don't know. This creates a whole different thing. But Trump also has this notion that he's a great deal maker, and he sees the world as something like an enlarged version of the New York City Buildings Department. He thinks that that everybody is playing the same game, and he can manipulate. And just not the way it is, as he found out on a few occasions last time. So I think in general, I don't like making predictions. I analyze, but I don't say, and this will definitely happen. I don't know. Nobody knows. And this guy is so unpredictable. One thing I will tell you, this is an interesting story that's in I forget if I included this story in the bomb or not, but I was talking with a nuclear guy in the Pentagon during the Trump administration. And he told me, I think there's less of a chance of a nuclear war with Trump than there was with Obama. And I said, okay, I'll bite. What's your logic? And he goes, well, I think if we get into a nuclear war, it'll start because we're coming to the aid of an ally. And Trump, as he put it, doesn't give a shit about allies. Now, I think there was something to that. But at the same time, if he really shows as much as he did last time that he doesn't give a shit about allies, this time I think there's a non-zero chance that South Korea starts to build a nuclear weapon, that maybe Japan cooperates in some way, that other things begin to happen as a result of that, and that maybe we don't know what kind of early warning systems some of these countries will develop, or PAL, permissive action links, especially with countries so close to each other. Things could get out of hand to a degree that either the U.S. finds itself getting drawn into the war or finds itself so isolated from what's going on that our interests, we can no longer defend our interests or our values. So it's I said in one column recently that it's time to go back and read books like The 20 Years Crisis by E.H. Carr, which talk about the interwar years. Again, I'm not saying we're on the verge of World War III, but history, it doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes.
Right.
There's a lot of poetry going on in world politics right now.
Yeah, really good points, and right in line with our podcast. Since we're all going to die, we need to inject the dark lining into any cloud that comes up. It's just in London this week. I gave this presentation. They asked, is Trump really serious about confronting China? I was like, I don't think Trump is very serious about confronting anyone militarily. He likes to play the crazy man, the wild man strategy. But I could easily imagine a President Xi going to Trump and saying, "Look, I have to reunify with Taiwan next year. Like, it's going to happen. I can offer you exclusive rights to Trump hotels in Shanghai this year if you take it, right?" And what I'm struck by is that there are people around Trump who've watched him last time who really think that they will be able to wag the dog. Right? They will be able to control his direction, but it really is about self-interest with him. And as you said, I think anybody with a newspaper and a TV set can figure out that he can be manipulated and flattered into policy.
And of course, the difference between the first term and this coming term is that at the beginning, he really didn't know anything the first term. He hired these establishment people. Because as you'll recall, they looked right out of central casting.
They looked the type, right?
And they really did kind of restrain him. We know this from all of their memoirs, right?
Right.
That he wanted to do something crazy, and they said, well, no, it's not a good idea.
Or they would slow roll him.
And he listened to them because, they're the experts. I'm new to this. Now he might not have these sorts of people. He knows what he wants to do. He has a better idea of how to do it and what kind of people you need to let him do it. So that's the big difference this time. Will there be? And now when he has the House and the Senate and the courts,
right, and immunity, right? I mean, the Supreme Court has said if you do it in your professional capacity, you're good.
Yeah. So the same overwhelming self-confidence that he has in the.
Well, he's been. I mean, I hate to say it, but he has been validated. His view all along was it doesn't matter what he does; he will get the support of the election, and maybe not the majority of Americans, but
he did. He got the popular vote this time, John.
But he got a plurality. He didn't get more than 50%.
That's true.
But no. So anyway. I try to reassure our allies by saying, well, don't worry, this guy's so feckless that he'll swerve at the end. But I think your point is a really valuable one, Fred. And we're going to take a break in a minute, but we're going to talk about why the United States eventually got serious about nonproliferation and preventing the spread of nuclear weapons, because I think it is directly relevant, and you know the history as well as I do, is that the consequence of the U.S. either being an agent of instability or pulling back from our alliances in Europe or cutting Ukraine loose or in East Asia is that you will see countries renew their interest in independent nuclear capabilities. And that ultimately is bad for the United States, not because it's bad that our allies are strong, but because we don't then have reassurance that these weapons won't get used in ways that undermine our interest. And you have some fantastic. I mean, one of the reasons I read you and I was eager to talk with you is you have a phenomenal grasp on the nuclear history, probably as good as anybody in the field. But you're pulling elements from Kennedy's recordings of the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the things I love about your book is that, again, not blowing it, but the chairman of the Joint Chiefs either willingly or unintentionally misrepresents the historical lesson, right? And we're from the Cuban Missile Crisis, and we're doing it again.
We're talking about my novel again.
Your novel, right? Exactly. Not General Milley, although some might argue. But in this world, we're seeing a lot of people who I think misinterpret what happened at the end of the Cold War, right? Mm-hmm. And they're eager to replay it. You see people pushing for greater nuclear options now in the United States, saying, we need to do what we did to the Soviet Union. We need to spend them into the ground. Not recognizing that we didn't spend the Soviet Union into the ground by nuclear buildup. We did it because their entire concept for how to run the country was flawed. But they also, even if that were true, China's pretty rich. It's going to be really hard to spend them into the ground because they hold our debt. And so anyway, I thought your historical examples here were terrific. Listen, we're going to take a brief break here. This is the part where we turn to our listeners and say, hey, are you a member of the Deep State Radio Network? We hope you are, because then we're going to talk a little bit more about the book and some other insights that Fred can share with us on the nuclear state of affairs. If you're not, sadly, we have to say goodbye to you, but hope that you'll go to deepstateradionetwork.com or dsrnetwork.com. You'll become a member for $7 a month. You'll get access to our entire Deep State Radio catalog, including Discord, including paywalled materials, and really benefit from all of the information that David Rothkopf and his team make available. So hope you'll join. If not, we'll say goodbye. Hope you make it to next week. And if you're a member, just stand by.